Hello and welcome. Welcome to our Data Management Summit USA Virtual. My name is Andrew Delaney. I'm President and Chief Content Officer at A-Team Group, and I'm hosting this live keynote session today. We know that many of you attend our annual live event, our Data Management Summit in New York. It's a personal favorite of mine. I love to make it over there, but alas, I'm not there in New York with you. On this occasion, I'm beaming to you through our streaming platform from London. We've transformed the event into a virtual event, needs must, as I'm sure you're all aware. And what we've done is we've really tried to make this as interactive and as close to the real thing as possible. So we hope that you find this as informative and as fun as usual. And we'd love your feedback. So yeah, so off we go. We're live now, and we're going to be hearing from a keynote, and we'll be introducing you to some of the speakers on the recorded content, the recorded sessions that we have prepared for you. So welcome. I'd like to start off really by thanking all of our speakers and our sponsors for their tremendous support and enthusiasm for helping us to make this possible and to continue to bring this event to you in spite of the current circumstances. So without further ado, let me explain very briefly how the event is going to work. This event runs over 2 days. That's today and tomorrow. We start off with a daily live keynote taking place at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, which is now. And that will be followed by a live speaker Q&A, which I'll be hosting. And we'll be joined by some of our speakers from, in fact, all of our speakers, I think, from the 2 days by day. So we also have for you these on-demand sessions that you are able to watch at your convenience on each day. If you don't have time to take it all in, the content will be available for purchase later. So that's an option if you can't find time to spend watching it all today. Okay, a new element is that we have matched you with other delegates. We've got sort of like a dating app on this thing. And basically we've asked everybody for their interests, and we've matched them so that people are connected to other conference delegates with similar interests, and you can connect with them through the chat function, and that will help you to make new connections, which is of course always part of the fun at DMS. The chat button is a red button on the bottom right hand side of your screen, so you should keep an eye on that, because when a little sign comes up, that shows that somebody wants to connect with you. So yeah, keep an eye on that. We have hot topic knowledge and resources available. These have been provided by our sponsors, and you can use this section of the platform to access white papers and other value-added content on relevant data management topics. You can find this by scrolling down on the sessions pages that are of interest to you in our related resources section. There's some valuable content in there, so I'd urge you to take a look. Okay. Before we move on, I would like to thank the sponsors again. Without them, this event wouldn't be possible, and we would not be able to bring this fantastic free content to you. So, you know, I would urge you, as I do at our live events, go and kick the tires. They're not there in person, but in this instance, I encourage you to connect with them and see how they can help. Take part in their free giveaways and prize draws. And there's a lot of nice prizes out there. If not for you, then for the kids or the other special people in your life. So we've got prizes like AirPods, Amazon gift vouchers, a Fitbit, Apple Watches. It's all nice stuff. So go and kick those tires and interact with those sponsors. Okay, let's get to the event itself. The theme of today is adapting data strategy for today's new normal and to accelerate digital transformation. It's a theme that I'm sure resonates with you all, as we've all had to deal with huge change and upheaval over the last 7 months or so. In a moment, I'll introduce our keynote speaker, Julia Bardmesser of Voya Financial, who many of you know, I'm sure. Before I do, let me highlight some of the great content we have on offer for you and explain how to get involved. So again, the content from today's agenda is only available for today. So do please take advantage of what's on offer and try to put time aside to watch what's relevant for you. We have 2 panel discussions with CDO level practitioners. These are looking at approaches to driving successful digital transformation with data management, and KYC, know your customer, how to get your customer data right to support regulatory compliance and digital customer experience. And finally, we have 3 keynote presentations, data scientists in disguise, adapting data strategy for today's new normal and accelerating digital transformation. And finally, a keynote on corporate actions. The future of finance is now. So I've talked about what's on offer. It's time for you guys to get involved in our first interactive challenge of the day. We will encourage you to ask questions of our keynote speaker, Julia, and to all our expert speakers in the Q&A session that follows using the comment box on the screen. You might notice that as well as our comments facility, if you open the polls tab to the side of the video, where you can take part in our polls, you can also ask anonymous questions in the Q&A tab if you feel more comfortable with that. Those will come through to me and I can ask our panelists once we get to the live session. To get started and set the scene for the day, we would like to ask you to vote in our first poll question. And we're asking you to tell us what are the biggest challenges and risks that you face in implementing a digital transformation program in your organization. To find the poll question, go to the right-hand side of the video and select Polls Q&A and select Polls to cast your vote. And that should be launching just about now. So if you look at the question, you should have a number of options there: managing data privacy and protection, cybersecurity and risks, workforce/employee risk, managing risks associated with shifting to the cloud, upholding data ethics and accountability. So that should be appearing on your screen shortly. While you are voting, I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. That is Julia Bardmesser, Senior Vice President, Head of Data, Enterprise Architecture and Salesforce Development at Voya Financial. We at A-Team have known Julia for a long time. Julia has been recently named in the list of 2020 Global Data Power Women by CDO magazine. She's been recognized as a top 150 business and transformation leader in 2020, and she is pioneering and leading the transformation of Voya's data analytics and architecture to improve speed to market and agility. Most importantly of all, Julia is a past winner of our Data Management Insight Practitioner of the Year Award. That's my most important accolade, if you ask me. Julia, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Good to see you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, good to see you too.
Great.
I wish I were in London.
I wish I were in New York, but you know, what can we do? It'll have to be another time, next time, I hope. So, you know, we are looking at resuming live events as soon as we can, obviously. These are, for once, these are factors outside of our control, I would say at this point. Oh, well, let's just keep going. Right. So, Julia, perhaps you can give us a little bit of background on yourself, your current role at Voya, your primary responsibilities, and your main areas of focus right now, and then we'll look at the poll results that come in.
So I'm at Voya, as Andrew said. I manage three different teams: enterprise data, enterprise architecture, and Salesforce development. So it's an interesting combination. It works, you wouldn't think of it, especially adding Salesforce development to enterprise data and enterprise architecture piece, but it works amazingly well because there is a lot of overlap and there is a lot of synergies between the three teams. And I'm enjoying it a great deal. And it allows for digital transformation and transformation of how Voya deals with both data architecture and CRM functionality to enable it and move it forward much better with having all three teams in one organization. And that's my focus. My focus is to build a reusable enterprise capability for Voya. And again, spanning our CRM and data and enterprise architecture.
It's very interesting that the Salesforce segment of that is included in here. I mean, to me, that's a real pointer about the importance of the data. I mean, Salesforce is a CRM, right? It's about client relationship management, but it's one of the heart of your engagement with the most important people into the organization, which are the clients, you know. So perhaps that's a reflection on the importance of data management in our world these days.
Yep. Yeah, this is one of the things that was recognized in Voya about a year ago. That's a year ago, Salesforce team joined my enterprise data and architecture team. And the strategy that we are putting in place is around enabling data-centric architecture for our CRM platform and transforming our CRM engagement with that data-centric approach in mind.
Really interesting. Excellent. Okay. Well, look, I think we should have the results of this poll now. Can I see the results of the poll? Wow, here we go. Technology in action. So let's have a look. It looks to me, so the biggest challenges and risks you face implementing a digital transformation program in your organization. Managing risks associated with shifting to the cloud is off my scale here. Cybersecurity risks, a third of you. Data privacy, workforce employee risk, data ethics, not such an interesting thing. Let's see, Julia, do these results look any big surprise to you? Do they resonate with your own experiences?
They're all risk-based. So I'm going to talk about in my talk what gets in the way of implementing digital transformation, and I've concentrated much more on the challenges. And one of the interesting points here that I see that cloud is leading the way of getting in the way or managing the risk associated with the cloud. To my mind, while there are obviously risks of moving to any new platform, and especially something as new as public cloud and with as many unknowns, public cloud is also one of the biggest enablers of digital transformation. So I'll talk about it a little bit more when I get to my keynote. But yeah, I'm surprised there is so much focus on the risks.
Yeah, and this cloud is something of a surprise to me, but hey, guess that's what we're all talking about these days.
Yes.
Certainly a lot of what we're talking about, so it's around that. Okay, all right, well, thanks for that. Thanks for voting in the poll. I guess we're going to move now over to you, Julia. We're going to hear from you, your keynote. The topic is leveraging disruption as a catalyst for change and digital transformation. If you have any questions for Julia, please use the Q&A feature on the right-hand side of the video page. And with that, I'll bow out and over to you, Julia.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. So one of the things I want to cover is I'm also from home and I live in Manhattan and I'm on the first floor. So there are going to be some random noises that have nothing to do with the talk. So just, it is what it is. We have, as Andrew said, needs must. So if you hear insistent calling on my intercom in my building, that means I got a delivery. I'm not going to go get it, but just, I felt like I should mention it because of course it's going to happen in the next 20 minutes. So this is my bio. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about it. The only point I want to make here is that what I'm talking about today, digital transformation, it's based not only on my experience at Voya the last 2.5 years, but overall my experience in the last 10 to 15 years in different types of financial organizations or financial services company, from the really large companies such as Citi and Deutsche Bank to much smaller ones, for example, FINRA and Voya as well. So it's totality of that experience and seeing how different companies go through transformational activities that bring together the thoughts that I put together for this keynote that I would like to share. So to start with, I want to talk about, so what I'm going to talk about is what is digital transformation? And it's obviously a good thing. We've been talking about it for a while. So why isn't everybody done yet? What are the difficulties around it? What are the challenges that get in the way? And then what is in the current very weird year? What's the influence and impact of that? And then what are the things that would improve or facilitate moving towards digital transformation? What are the things you need to look at and to make it easier or to achieve this goal of digital transformation in mind? So to start with, again, as many of you know, I'm a data geek. Can we go back to the previous slide? Yes, thank you. So to start with, I'm a data geek, as again, many of you know, and I'm going to start with definition. So what is, and I might say that I think evolved, well, what did they say? Somebody is delivering something. So digital transformation definition has evolved. It has evolved from focusing much more on the end, on the consumer client experience in the digital properties, to be in the definition that I'm given now. And that's kind of my definition, but I think it's becoming more and more prevalent in the industry, which is it's a continuous reduction of friction in how company operates end to end. And that's end to end is really important. What do I mean by that? So of course there is improved customer experience. And again, I want to make it broader than just the customer experience for the digital properties. It's also meeting the customer, understanding where the customer is, and meeting the customer where he or she is. For example, I'm Gen X. I'd rather deal with everything over the web. If need be, I can call somebody. My daughter, who is much more millennial, close to millennial age, she wants to do app. She absolutely does not want to call anybody ever. And she can go to the website if app isn't particularly good, but that's pretty much it. On the other hand, my mom does not have a digital presence. She does not have a smartphone. So she wants to have a letter. And since obviously I have an accent, my mom came here much later than I did. So she's also not that comfortable going to the branch. So she'd rather have a letter. So knowing who your customer is and reaching with the letter to people who like letters and having the good websites for people who like websites and giving a good app experience, you need to understand that. It's not just improving your app. Similarly, that is on the product side. We want to be able to accelerate our product development and to quickly evaluate, are we succeeding or are we failing? Is it the product that brings us more customers, more exposure? Is it doing what we want it to do or it doesn't? So we can evolve our product set better. Again, but this is frontline. You also want to make sure that on the back end, that every operation, when you bring the customers on, it's streamlined. You don't have any manual interventions either in reporting or in administering the product for the customers. You don't have to do Excel macros. You don't download, do something, upload, backup. And on the last one, but not the least, underline all of this, being able to do actionable analytics, to be able to predict when you think about where the customer is going to be. You want to be able to predict. You want to be able to test your predictions, and then you want to be able to innovate really rapidly. So again, all of those things are wonderful things, and it seems kind of reasonable enough and not too complicated, but why is it we've been talking about digital transformation for a while. Why is it not happening or doesn't happen with the speed with which you would think if everybody realizes? And I don't think any of those 5 things is rocket science. it's a reasonable goal for the enterprise. Why is it so hard to get there that we keep talking about it and talking about what are the obstacles and how do you get there? So if we can get to the next slide. So this one is kind of fun, and I'm not going to talk about all of the things listed here, but so one of the major one is culture. So what we're used to, and that's across many companies I've been to, including talking to people who are in the startups. It's deadline first and data last. And it's very reasonable, right? We all have client commitments, or we want to bring new functionality to the market. And even if you're not a legacy type company, you still, if you're a startup, you actually probably have even more pressure to bring your product to the market and to reach for the first customer. And doing kind of making shortcuts, making it really fast right now and planning to fix it later, that's a culture that's prevalent, again, from 100-year-old companies to something that's been out for 2 or 3 years. So that's a self-perpetuating problem. And if you do deadline first and data last, what happens? You create legacy. So obviously, again, all the company has huge legacy infrastructure and technology. A lot of banks or financial companies are still relying on COBOL and mainframe platforms to do their basic fundamental transaction processing. There is still tons of spaghetti code, but even the newer company, as I say, since you're trying to reach for the deadline first, it takes a lot of discipline to not create legacy. So in the legacy piece, I want to talk about one piece that maybe not as obvious as all the other words I have there around applications, sprawl, and end user apps and spaghetti code. The one that's maybe not as central to how people think about how it gets in the way is lack of metadata. Because as you can see in the definition, data underpins all of success factors on what does it mean to transform digitally your company. And most companies do not historically manage metadata or even create metadata. So you might know where the physically your data is and what are the physical names of the attributes in your databases, but what is the meaning of that? Because the name on the attribute, as many of us know, may have something to do with data that's actually there or may have nothing to do with the data that's actually there. So what your data is, where it is, and how it moves. That's really important, and not having that information, so definitions and lineage and where the data is one of the major obstacles to digital transformation. And then the other one that's kind of getting, and that's more recent than, it's speed of change. So what I mean by speed of change, there is a lot more competition, all the fintech companies that are coming up, industry innovation, new sources of data, ability to handle new sources of data. But the other piece that's also speed of change, it's a cycle between something being a differentiator for your company to being table stakes in the industry is really short. And what do I mean for that? Let me use websites as an example. So let's say 5-6 years ago, having a website was a differentiator. So if you went to a market and you had a product and you had web presence, that was a differentiator because not many others had. And then it became having a good website. So everybody had a website, and if you had a really good one, that was a differentiator. And now it's not, it's table stakes. Do you really gonna go with a company because they have a wonderful website? No, you may not go with a company that has a really bad website, but it's now table stakes. Now, on the apps, phone apps, I think we are moving. It's not having a phone apps and not a differentiator. However, actually just yesterday, I was looking for a fitness tracker to give my father. And I've noticed in the reviews, so everybody's fitness tracker has an app. But having a good app, easy to use app, easy to configure app is a differentiator because that came up a lot in the comments. So I think having a good app, like having an app is not a differentiator, but having a really good one, easy to navigate, easy to set up, to configure, that's still a differentiator. But I think that's gonna move on into table stakes much sooner. So those are things that are prevalent, again, as I said, across all of my experience for the past 25 years. All three things are there. Again, speed of change kind of picked up in the last 4 to 5 years, and created significantly even more challenge to deal with on the digital transformation side. So what has changed in this really, as I said, really weird year? So this is kind of trying to bring humor to somewhat difficult year that we've seen a lot of tragedy throughout. However, there is a silver lining, and one of them that people are becoming much more, or have become, much more comfortable with their life being conducted digitally. So one of the examples, for example, so I'm in New York, as I mentioned. So March and April and May in New York, before we realized that touching something is actually not a good vector for COVID, touching things was a problem. So getting mail is not like you don't want to open your mail. So got people a lot more comfortable doing things on the app or doing things on the web. Another one is a rise of e-signatures. I have probably done more e-signatures in the past 3 months that I have done in the previous, since they have been kind of invented and put on the market. The other piece goes to the culture. It actually helps with the culture. So that piece that I've said, deadlines first, data last. So what I've noticed, and it's a significant change in how business management on the C-level views data, that now there is understanding that you need to have access to data and much quicker than before, that you need to make your decisions based on the data that you have in the organization, and having monthly updates to your business reporting isn't really doing it anymore. Things have moved so fast. Again, the situation was so out of what of the experience we've had. So there is no historical data how you deal with pandemic. Last pandemic was almost 100 years ago, and we don't have data from that. 401k plans, for example, didn't exist back then. You cannot see what's happened with 401k behavior 100 years ago. So need for the data and for timely daily updates to the data became really important and really clear to the business. So what it helped is to create a much more buy-in into needing to go into all of that very difficult foundational effort into building data and digital foundation for the digital transformation. So I want to get to, so what are the things that you need to think about, or I'm thinking about in terms of enabling digital transformation? So again, for people who know me, it's not a surprise that at the top of this list is going to be data management. As I've said before, all of the 5 components of what digital transformation means need robust data management foundation. So master data management, architecture that's metadata and data-based, based on the data first, on the really important, robust business-centric data governance, business value-centric data governance. Another piece that I want to talk about is enterprise semantic layer. So semantic, what I've said before, one of the problems with legacy is, but not enough metadata, or not any metadata, depending on where you are, what part of the business you are. So enterprise semantic layer, semantic-based architecture, meaning-based architecture and approach is really important. And that's one of the ways what we're doing in the building out enterprise data capabilities at Voya is making it, centering it on the semantic layer, on enterprise data model that brings together the definitions and the structures and relationships between them. The second one is public cloud, which is a huge enabler. And public cloud, I think there've been also transformation on how people see public cloud. So I think it started out as being a cost play. So the idea was that using public cloud infrastructure is cheaper than using on-prem data centers. I'm not sure it's entirely true anymore. So there is some patterns of how you use data that public cloud makes more less expensive. I don't think it's true across the board. So if you're moving all of your data center into public cloud, I don't think you're just doing it for the cost. I don't think is enough of a business case, just given the cost of moving it over. But what public cloud does give you is agility and exposure to new capabilities. What it helps you with is this challenge of the speed of change. And just think about it. Before that, when you do the planning, so you have, we have a yearly, most companies have yearly planning cycle. So today, I have to figure out how many servers I will need in a year. And we need to plan for it, we need to buy it, and if we make a mistake, either way, either we spend too much money and we didn't need that much, or we didn't spend enough money, we didn't buy enough, and now we can't put in place whatever capabilities and the features that we want to do a year from now. You don't have that problem. You don't even have to think about it in public cloud. You can think about other things. For example, how to do database, metadata-centric architecture. You don't need to think about how many servers you need. The other piece that's very interesting is that the cost of failure goes down a lot. So you can experiment and you can try something new, a new feature to your product. And if you fail, it's okay because you didn't put too much in. So it reduces risk aversion of the companies because you can try things and you fail, it's not a big deal. You didn't just kill your career. You can go ahead and try something else, and it encourages people to try other things, and it's a much faster cycle. So you can deal with this kind of shrinkage in time between differentiator and table stakes. You can keep coming up with the new differentiators and actually testing out, did it really do anything for me? And if it didn't, okay, moving on. So I think that's where public cloud is a huge enabler to digital transformation. And the next one is also goes to the dealing with the speed of change. So dealing with how do you build for reuse and value, but also flexible enough so the new use cases that come along, you can reuse your infrastructure. You can reuse your foundational data capabilities, foundational enterprise architecture capabilities, CRM capability for the new challenges that come that are raising in front of you. And that's more of an approach that I call consumption-based approach. And I want to talk more about that because that goes into how we've been building so far in Voya. And there's been quite a bit of value that we have realized, and also quite a bit of things that we have learned about things to do and things not to do. So if we can move to the next slide. Yep. So this is actually a slide that I use in my regular presentations at Voya because it shows our approach. So my, I guess, least favorite question that I get asked by both technology and business teams quite often, what is your roadmap? What data are you bringing onto your platform when, so we can align and we know when our process is going to get on? And my answer is completely unsatisfying. Is, well, I have a target state architecture, and my goal is to bring data that is required to do cross-silo for cross-silo usage, be it reporting, digital presence, analytics, into that platform. Now, what data gets in there first is consumption-based. And again, what do I mean by that, by consumption-based? Many companies, including Voya, have a lot of strategic initiatives that require data. What we do from enterprise data team is we participate and we are at the table when the priorities are decided, and we figure out together with the business teams and technology teams which of those projects can benefit from having this data enterprise data platform, and how much the data we would bring for this project would be reusable for other parts of the company and reusable for the next project coming along from this part. And we build minimal viable product to meet the requirements of this specific consumption case. But we build it in a way that's reusable. And the key to that reusability is going back to our semantic layer and grounding everything that we build from data perspective in understanding of the data of major data classes and the relationships between them. So as long as we keep that reflecting how the business really functions, that's how we build reusability. And then when we have a next consumer coming on, we validate that what we have built so far satisfies the requirements. We figure out where the gaps are and we add new features. And then the next consumer comes along and takes advantage of a much fuller feature set. It repeats on itself on and on and on. And we have approached it pretty much every single platform that we're building is like that. So our very first one was around very common master data management of the client data, organizational data. And it was done, again, very minimal. And then the next consumer came along and we added features and it's been reused. And so at this point, with quite a bit of value realized just from just a fairly small amount of investment that we needed to do to build an initial MVP for this. So I highly recommend that approach. Again, it's solving today and tomorrow problem as opposed to trying to get understanding fully of what full landscape and full requirements across all of the data in the enterprise. And that by the time you understand it and start building it, you have the whole new set of requirements that you can't address yet. And on that, that's it.
Very good. And thank you so much, Julia. Applause from me, so you can hear that. Thanks for sharing with us. I've got a few questions from the audience, actually. I think are quite interesting ones. The first one relates to your point about metadata that you went back to on one of those slides. What are the proven strategies for raising awareness around the importance of metadata with executives? I'm assuming they mean sort of non-data executives, senior executives. And do we need to monetize it to make it resonate better?
Oh, well, if we can figure out how to monetize metadata, it will definitely resonate. I haven't figured it out yet.
Not
frankly.
yet.
Yep, not yet, working on it, but not quite yet. However, in terms of strategy, well, the first strategy is please don't use the word metadata. That's just not a good way of explaining things to business executives. I also do not recommend using word semantic ontology or semantic meaning. I think the best way to make the case of importance of metadata is actually through data quality. So a lot of in establishing a robust data quality practice and process. And if you get your data quality issues, and every company, every business line has data quality issues. And starting from and really good partners on that would be cross-silo functions. So corporate finance, corporate risk are wonderful places to go as a kind of initial rollout of data quality. And then they identifying the impact of those data quality problems on the bottom line, be it in terms of the amount of manual work that needs to happen. In financial companies, obviously, you usually have some MRAs and MRIAs from regulators that point out the problems. And then making a point that understanding where this data coming from and understanding the meaning of the data, so that's metadata, you don't have to say that, then you get the that's how you make a case. That's one of the ways that I have found is how to get a case both on the data governance side, but also on the data management, data technology side, where you need to build understanding where the data is, what the data is, and how it moves. So data quality is one of the ways that's been successful. Monetizing it, I would love to hear, again, I wish that was in person because I could ask, like, have you figured out a way to monetize? But I'm still working on that. Maybe next year I'll be able to say something.
Next year we'll come back to that one. Final question, perhaps a little more philosophical question. I think it relates to your cartoon slide, actually. What do you see, Julia, as the beneficial outcomes of COVID-19? I mean, I don't see any real beneficial outcomes, but I think perhaps it's driven us to do certain things.
Yeah, I think it's changes in the behavior. So from the business perspective, the only one that I've seen is that new awareness of data and much more comfort with the digital presence. Some more comfort with people working remotely. So we have gone, I think it's been a little bit of a back and forth historically. At some point, everybody could have been working remotely, and then people realized that some people actually don't work when they're working remotely. So it went back. So you had the pendulum swing back, bring everybody into the office, and remove all the walls, have open floors so everybody sees each other and talks to each other all the time. I think now pendulum is swinging back a little bit, because even with everybody being on the floor, that's cheaper than everybody having an office or even everybody having a cube. It's from real estate perspective, it's even cheaper to people to work from home. So it's swinging back that you have some, and a lot of companies, from what I hear and Envoy as well, the productivity did not really drop. So all of the deliveries are still happening and are being done. So there is more of, again, back to the comfort with more work happening remotely. I'm frankly, for myself, I'm hoping it's not going to swing too far, because I really, really miss working with people face to face. That's just one of the things that it's getting really old by now. And I think we're still looking at about 6 months of that still ahead of us. Hopefully that's all it is. I think there are the more societal or political implications that might be positive from it, but I'm not going to talk about politics.
No, we're here to talk about data management today.
Yes.
And with that, we'll move to the next leg, if you like, or next phase of this session. We have a bunch more questions for you, Julia, but we're going to ask you maybe to respond to those through the platform, so we can widen the discussion now. Getting a great response from your keynote, so that's excellent. So thanks, Julia, for your insight on that. We're going to widen the discussion now by bringing in our first group of speakers who were on our digital transformation panel. So that's recorded content that you can access. Julia will be hanging around to chime in where she sees fit. And just again, to remind everybody, this is your chance to quiz our expert speakers. Here they are, they're all arriving. And they're here to take your questions on the topic we're talking about, and any other data management challenges you may face. So again, please use the questions box on the page, and we will put your questions to our experts. Let me quickly, as they've all joined now, I think, quickly introduce the group. So obviously we have Julia, and Julia is joined by John Bottega of EDM Council, Brian Greenberg of BNY Mellon, Deborah Lorenzen of State Street, Malavika Solanki of DSB, the Derivative Service Bureau, Harry Chopra of Axiom SL, and Scott Price of QSIP Global Services. This feels like a video, a TV quiz show here, guys. I've never done this before, so I'm already enjoying myself. So let's kick things off by revisiting those poll questions, those poll results. And I'm going to ask Harry to sort of chime in first. We looked at these a bit earlier, Harry, and we remarked that the sort of risk associated with shifting to the cloud was significantly the sort of most common answer here for what are the biggest challenges and risks you face implementing a digital transformation program in your organization. Harry, then anybody else, maybe chime in. What do you think of that result, Harry?
Well, risk by its very definition is about uncertainty, right? So if you're moving from an on-premise infrastructure to the cloud, you really have to sort of think about uncertainty in sort of three broad buckets. One of them is the people element of how the controls are going to be implemented so that people have access to the right set of applications. That's an element of this. The other element is the process. How are we going to go from an on-premise application infrastructure to a cloud infrastructure, and what am I going to break when I sort of do that? And the third element is on an ongoing basis. What is the change service that the application provider is going to provide to me as a financial institution to make sure that they continually upgrade their infrastructure, their application sources, and any changes that I may need. So those are the three buckets that I would put them in. And I think, the audience is right. Those are the three buckets that comprise managing risks associated with moving to the cloud.
Very good. Thanks, Harry. So let me, let's go to John. John, you were moderator for the session on approaches to digital transformation with data management. Can you give us, give our live audience a bit of a flavor of the discussion, and just give us a feel for what the highlights were of your chat, if you will?
Sure. Thanks, Andrew, and good to see everybody back. Forgive me that there's some work being done. There's a problem with working from home. There's work being done outside my house. They're taking down a tree. So assuming the tree doesn't fall on my house while I'm talking to you, I will be okay. So bear with that noise in the background. I just want to respond, Andrew, to your first question. I think it really summarizes the group's perspective. When we looked at the digital transformation, the real issues we saw was how it's impacting the way we do business. So I think everybody chimed in on the impact of digitization to the way we interact with our customers, the impact to that user experience. So where we, if you're a brick and mortar, you're working with people face to face, you have a little bit of leeway to not having everything perfect. When you now separate the human factor and now you're working through digital interfaces, it better work exactly 100%, or the customer can very easily click to the next website and move on to the next website. So digitization is creating a challenge in that space. Obviously, the point you brought up on security and issues related to that, we're doing so much business over the internet and through digital, whether it's our mobile phone, et cetera. Our personal information is out there. So what are the ways that we're having some protection against that? And clearly all of this rolls back to cloud implementation, a huge migration now towards cloud. And inherent in that is obviously the benefits of that, but the challenges that were just discussed in info security and privacy, mix in the issues of data ethics, are we using the data appropriately? So that was kind of the general gist of the group. And please, folks, jump in if I left anything out.
Very good. Well, we're actually getting quite a lot of questions coming from the audience live. And this is obviously good stuff. So practitioners coming in and asking. So let me ask the panel what advice they would give to the Chief Data Officer as he or she embarks on a digital transformation program. Is there anyone would like to take a first shot at that?
I'll jump in, Andrew. It's good to see you. And
sorry. Go ahead, Scott. Good to see you too.
Good to hear John's comments as well, whether it's the trees or the background noise. I think it reinforces the live nature of this session, which keeps it exciting.
Keeps it edgy, Scott, edgy.
Yeah, I'll keep my comments brief. We spoke as a panel about digital transformation and some of the benefits beyond the burden. I would say advice to a chief data officer, and it may sound a bit contrite, but patience. Digital transformation is not implemented on a smooth, straight line all the time. And one example, I spoke during the panel session about robotic process automation and the extent to which that's been implemented successfully within the QSIP franchise and business. And in that instance, really seeking to automate operational workflow, turning legacy email registration requests into a process that has much greater turnaround time, much greater staff effectiveness and resiliency, but it was not a straight line. So for instance, no one told us during the testing phase that robots can fall asleep. So to have live staff members, data ops professionals, work through the interface, test relentlessly every potential use case before going live. That was a wake-up call to us, pun intended, that a robot using that automated process could fall asleep, and that we need to perfect that process before rolling it out to the larger industry, which we've now done.
Very good, thank you. Deborah, let's bring you in then. So advice for CDOs. And there's another question here about prioritization. Lots of different projects competing for limited resources. So maybe you can frame your response around that too.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. I'll start by building on Scott's points around, sort of advice for the chief data officer. And my advice would be, years ago, when we were moving processes into centers of excellence and away from long-standing teams, the mistake happened that we moved the process and then tried to make it better. And that's what we can't do with digitization. We have to clean up our data. We have to do the foundational work and then move it into digital. And can you do some of that cleanup in the process? Sure, you can. But it's really important to make sure that you understand that data and you've got some control around it before you try to digitize it. Otherwise, you're doing the old thing where you just take in junk and put it into a different place. So my advice would be to make sure that you've got your foundational governance in order, and you understand what data you have before you try to digitize that data. Sorry, Andrew, what was the second part of that, the new bit of the question?
It was about prioritizing projects in the face of, obviously limited resource that we all face.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, prioritization is the perennial challenge, right? And in this environment where there are some downward pressures on budgets and there's, real focus on what we actually have to do, it can be really easy to focus on the regulatory stuff and on the control and the risk sides and forget about some of the things that would be more supportive of the customer facing. I mean, I'm a fan of trying to find a balance in that. Obviously, there's always going to be some have to do's in there. You need to, though, find balance between the doing all the things that you absolutely have to do. But, we were in an executive session not long ago and our leadership was asking, is that really a have to do? Because a lot of times people really think some of them are. It's just about balance in that prioritization and not throwing everything to either the latest flavor of the month or throwing things just to that in this environment where people feel a little bit constrained based on COVID and this and that, just making sure that you're still thinking forward and also working on the foundation.
Very good.
Andrew, if I could just springboard just a comment off of Deborah's statement.
Absolutely.
You said advice to the CDO, and one of the things we just discussed in the panel was the differentiation between the CDO, Chief Data Officer, versus Chief Digital Officer.
Interesting.
The digital officer we recognize as the person that's bringing that functionality to the customers or even internally. But to Deborah's point, and really to the point of the whole panel, those are great fancy tools, but if your data is incorrect, what are you actually doing? So, I've seen this in my own experience in just retail. How well do the retail companies know me personally? And when I get emails with my name spelled wrong or the wrong name totally, that's going to turn me off as a customer, right? So the advice to the Chief Data Officer is make sure your information, especially information related to customer information, is pristine and correct, because that's now, at hyperspeed going out to the industry. And if it's wrong, it just creates a bad impression of your organization.
I totally concur with that. As a journalist, as a young journalist starting out of the Wall Street Journal, John, believe me, typos were not well regarded, and it's exactly the same reason. Undermines the credibility. Are we serious about our task in hand, etc., etc.? So, very important stuff. Let me move along and throw this one out to Malavika and to Brian. In terms of identifying and seizing opportunities to be innovative in order to use data for delivering better investment management outcomes, but let's widen that to any kind of business outcomes. How do we go about that, identifying, seizing opportunities to be innovative?
Shall I go first, or?
Go right ahead, Malavika.
After you, Malavika. I think it comes down to, it probably builds on the prioritization point, actually, if anything, because innovation for its own sake is almost pointless. It has to feed either a deliberate strategy that the firm is pursuing, or an emergent strategy because of what you're hearing along the value chain, either from the customer facing side or the operation side of the business. So I think that's the very first part of it, which is what is it your institution's trying to achieve, and how are you going about prioritizing those goals? And that comes to the point that Deborah was making earlier about balance. That's the first piece. The second piece is also within that, once you've identified, regardless of which of the two strategies you want to use, once you've identified that path forward, it's then about making sure that you're building on strong foundations, which is where John had gone to with this, which is you've got to be absolutely crystal clear about, are you relying on good quality basics and golden source foundations? Once you have that, you then look at what is that innovation trying to achieve? Are you trying to be sustaining about it? Are you trying to be disruptive? Are you trying to go after otherwise non-consumers? And you've got to be crystal clear about where you're trying to take your business, and only then pursue things rather than just for the shiny things that are available to us.
Yeah, I would concur, Malvika. I think we talked a little bit in the panel, I think, about the difference between the exciting stuff that people see on the front and the boring stuff that we have to do in the back to make sure that the exciting stuff works, right? And I think, a lot of the questions we've discussed here today really revolve around that point, right? Digitization is, it's a buzzword today. It's something we talk about, but really I feel there's a big, I think I mentioned in the panel, there's a big distinction between digitizing and automating, right? And if you just take the manual process, or the process of old that had been working in the past, and just move it online and just automate it, what you find is you might be able to do it faster, because machines can typically move faster than people, but you don't really get the benefit of what digitization can really provide, right? And I think, some of these newer ways of thinking about whether it's customer service or billing or transaction processing or payments, there's a whole series of topics you can talk about. There's a lot of things we can do now interactively with portals and online experiences that are different than the old, fill out a giant form, whether that form's on paper or on a screen, send a giant document across the wire, whether that's online or on paper. But all of it, all of it depends on that underlying plumbing being in place, right? And so we talk a lot about in our panel, and as we discussed in preparation for the panel, we talked a lot about underlying customer data, underlying product data, underlying reference data. A lot of this stuff is not the exciting, stuff that everybody likes to talk about in the brochures. But if your client data isn't accurate, if it isn't consistent across your business lines, if it isn't feeding your management reports and your regulatory reports, all of those things, it feels a lot like the typos you experienced at the Wall Street Journal, right? But the problem is actually much more pervasive than that. We're running artificial intelligence and machine learning models now, and the data that's feeding those models, if that's not consistent or well defined, I know Julia spoke about metadata in her talk. If that isn't well defined, you're going to reach incorrect or incomplete conclusions. And I think that's one of the benefits of this kind of a world, but also one of the big challenges.
Very good, thank you. Just to then, we're running out of time. Closing words, Harry, if I may, just perhaps give us a flavor of some of the emerging technologies that you've seen when you're looking at things like collaborative analytics in the cloud while preserving privacy and non-bias. We have a question from the audience on that topic. Very briefly, if you anything,
sure.
Shed any light on that.
Sure. I think the biggest thing really is the ability to, let's say you have consumer data and it moves from one system to the other system where you're doing some analytics. You want to make sure you have privacy policies implemented, and that data that has what we call personally identifiable information is appropriately masked, and that the analytic team is working on that data without knowing who those people really are. And that way that eliminates that whole idea of having an implicit bias into the analytics that you're doing. So so having a privacy policy, and then of course, having the ability to data mask it is very, very key. I think there's plenty of technology available for you to do slicing and dicing of data and charts and graphs, but the ability to make sure that we can say in that data set, I need you to pick this particular elements and mask them. That's quite important.
Very good. Okay. Well, look, we are actually out of time for this session. Thank you all for joining us. I wish we were doing this in person, but this is certainly the next best thing. But we should do it every week. I'm just kidding. So I do appreciate you all joining us and making time for us today. We really appreciate it. And thanks for all your help on those panel sessions too. So thanks to everybody in this session. Next up, we're going to bring in our next group of speakers. So you're going to see these guys drop off and a whole new group drop back in. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Take care.
Great to see you. Great to see you. So next up, let's see. We'll be joined by speakers from our KYC panel, plus two of our keynotes, Sam, who I can already see, and Linda. Hi, Bill. So I think we may have lost a couple of people because we're running a little behind. No, Dessa's here. Great. Hi, Dessa.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you? Good. How you doing?
Oh, I'm just wonderful. Just wonderful. So at the risk of repeating myself, we're joined now by people from our sessions that are pre-recorded that you can see through the platform. And the idea here is really just to be able to ask them questions live. I've got a few questions for them, but we'd love to give priority to any questions coming in through that questions and comments button. So while you're thinking about questions to really give these guys a hard time, let me introduce our lovely panelists here. We're joined by Dessa Glasser of the Financial Risk Group, by Bill Hauserman of Bureau Van Dijk, by Linda Kaufman of SmartStream RDU, and by Sam Sundara of SIX. Welcome and thank you for taking time to join us today.
Thank you.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Brilliant. Okay, well, look, let me kick off with some questions that I have, and we'll see if we get some other questions coming into the session. Let me kick off with a question for Linda. Data Scientists in Disguise was your the title of your presentation. Sounds ominous. Why did you choose to focus on this, Linda?
I think it comes down to what RDU does. And so a lot of what we're seeing when we deal with data quality or when we're talking to the firms around data costs and helping them manage their data costs, and my years in the banks, no one has a really good understanding of where all the data expertise are hidden. And so I have found over the years that when they're doing their cost analysis in particular, they're never really accounting for how much it's costing them to manage their data. And I think as we, move to more digitalization and really dive into the fact that everybody recognizes right now how important the data is, I think it's becoming more of a benefit if you know where all of your data experts are. We're going out and hiring data scientists, which there is a true role for the data scientists, but in my presentation, it was more about those hidden data managers and data experts that I don't think are always recognized and need to start to become.
Absolutely, and that, I mean, of course, on the flip side there, you've got this sort of cost layer, if you like, in terms of your data management overall cost. You've got the technology, you've got the data, then you've got the people, the experts to manage that. I mean, how should firms be looking at that to make sure they've got a really good view of the true cost of data management?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with that good transparency with your users, your downstream users. So understanding their needs and then digging a little deeper than just the top requirements and asking them what they're doing now. Because even within a group, a front end, say a trading organization, a desk, you're not going to really have, you may be speaking to somebody that really doesn't understand who's doing what with actual data. And so I think it's that transparency, those continuous, discussions with your user community to understand who's doing what. And, if you think about it, even if 20 people across a large firm was doing, 60 minutes of extra data management, maybe in a spreadsheet, or going out and sourcing it from another, source that maybe the data management system within their firm doesn't source data from, that's 3 FTEs, in a given day trying to manage data that we're not accounting for. So I think it's that a key to it is that interaction with your downstream users.
Very good. Thank you. Let's turn to Sam. Your keynote was around corporate actions. The future of corporate actions is now. Corporation's been around for a long time, Sam, as an issue. Why did you choose this particular topic this time around?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's core to our business, but clearly it's a hugely challenging time for all of our capital markets customers. I mean, it's pandemic, it's market volatility, it's geopolitical situation, it's total cost of ownership, it's ESG, sustainability, diversity, and then top of everything else, they're facing disruption, disintermediation, and displacement. And it's kind of these times that bring out the inventiveness and innovation and creativity, particularly in capital markets, because it really evolves based on the available technology and then the available data. And all firms are looking at their data, as Linda just said, and how do they turn that data into insights? How do they turn those insights into knowledge and intelligence? And they're also looking at risk and operational efficiency. Those things don't go away, and corporate actions is critical in both of those. And it was on that basis that we commissioned the survey, and really to get the pulse of our global client base, really in that workflow back office asset servicing area. And honestly, it was one of the most insightful reports that we've had, and really the challenge and risk that our customers are facing daily in corporate actions, and how we can support them in that process. So yeah, that was the basis for the talk.
Very good, thank you. So let's broaden the discussion a bit. Obviously, I've got some questions really about the panels, the KYC panel. But before I get to that, we're getting some questions from the audience. We always like to help our audience out first. So let's kick off with Dessa and Bill on this first question. What are the most compelling current use cases for AI and ML, machine learning, in data management? Any view on those, guys, on how people are using this stuff?
Sure, I can start. There's a lot of compelling use cases for AI and ML. One of it is more on the machine learning side, is just looking at automating the KYC process and looking at that. However, if you take that and further start looking at combining structured and unstructured data, you can start looking at trends. So if you have a 360 view of your client, which means that you have your governance in a row and your clients and your products, you can see where trends are. What are people buying now? What are they not buying? Those are really critical things. Another area is to look at industries in, say, risk management, especially in the COVID environment. Which companies are going to be more susceptible in this environment naturally, in any of the recreation or some of the airlines that fly to particular destinations. Some of the destinations that are more on the vacationing side. And then I would say that surveillance, looking at AML is critical, knowing the relationships and the different relationships among your clients, the transactions. You can start looking for suspicious transactions, particularly using knowledge graphs and understanding the relationship and that 360 view of the client. Once you get that information, then you can start combining the structured and unstructured data. The one thing that I would advise, though, is to make sure that you train the models. because you can get a lot of false positives. And if you don't really have, if you don't know who your clients are and the products, and if you haven't had that defined well, then it's really hard to use the data, and you may get spurious results.
Very good. Bill, let's bring you into the conversation. We talked on the panel, you talked about KYC, creating a digital customer experience. First up, why is that such a hot topic at the moment? And we've got a client, an audience question with respect to AMLD6, so and the implications of that. So maybe you can sort of fill us in on how that discussion went on the panel and give us some context around that.
Sure. We specifically focused in on this challenge between a customer digital experience, which is really awesome and makes them very happy, and they come to you instead of going somewhere else, and the regulatory expectations, because those two are counter. Because if you're a customer, and to satisfy the regulatory expectations, you're going to want to use, you're going to need a lot of information. And so that's the challenge. But I think Linda and Dessa just talked a little bit, and as well as Sam, about there's technologies now that do a lot of the heavy lifting. So if you'd like to look at the two major AI benefits, and I call it structured AI. This is AI that is more than rules-based. It's been well-trained, but it's not thinking for you. And this would be data discovery and then data management, because there's so much information that the data management, a person can't get the data out fast enough. And Linda was talking to that issue. So now roll in that environment, roll in the sixth AML directive for the EU. Well, if you look at that and take the lineage of the directives, I think this is where they are saying to us that essentially 22 crimes need a way, can't exist unless they can launder money. I mean, it's that simple. So if you don't look deeply in your due diligence at the people you're engaging with, your clients, if you don't know if they've been involved in those 22 historically to give you some type of predictive model, you're not doing enough. And I think that's the challenge. And so now AI is going to be critical for both the data discovery side, but also for the understanding it quickly enough to be able to stop the bad actors.
And do you see regulators being aware of that, Bill? Are they demanding that? Are they, on the flip side of the fence, are they expecting to see that?
They, as all good regulators, they put the stake in the ground, and AML6 is essentially effective December 3, but they're not going to even be thinking about it. It's like the UK Bribery Act back in 2010, a year before they really started to look into alignment to that. So I think there you have a grace period. We have a grace period. They've set the goalposts. And if you are not looking deeper into background, and it was done traditionally with enhanced due diligence, and that's expensive. So it's got to be via the automated, which means, to Linda's point, you've got to have the data and it better be right. And to Dessa's point, if it's wrong, AI is useless because it's just going to give you wrong results.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, we've got more questions coming in, some aimed specifically at our keynotes. First one for Linda. Quite a blunt question. How can firms discover the true cost of a project?
It's tricky because right. So it's about, as I mentioned before, engaging to try to understand how many people have to do something. So for a data project, for instance, right, knowledge is power. So the more inputs that you have about how many people need to fill gaps. So, you may think that a project is all-encompassing. You've selected a data provider, for instance, and it has everything that you think it needs. And so you're basing your costs on that project based on that data provider. But you find out, 3 months down the road after you've invested in this infrastructure, in this, enhancement, that somebody is filling in gaps and having to do extra work downstream because there wasn't, and so now you have to put that cost into your model. So I think, again, it all comes down to kind of being a detective and figuring out where how many people are touching the data. And the more of that information you have, the better it is to, you may decide to, bring some outsource. So when you're doing your evaluation, if you have that true cost, it means the benefit is you can make decisions more accurately, right? So maybe you're outsourcing instead of keeping something in-house, or maybe the opposite, you're keeping something in-house instead of outsourcing. Maybe you're going to vendor A instead of vendor B. And so when you take into effect all those other costs, a vendor that maybe seemed too high, or another solution that seemed too high actually may not be so high when you take into all those other costs. So I think it's detective. So there's no perfect answer there. And I think each firm is a bit different because of their legacy systems and their infrastructure, but it's as much giving that priority to that original detective work and not biting off too much, going back to Julia's presentation, right? You don't want to spend, forever in the requirements phase. You want to understand consumption, immediate consumption, but at the same time, giving that due diligence to going out and saying, who are my users and what are they going to end up having to shoulder because our solution isn't giving it to them.
Very good, thank you. We got two more questions. First one I'm going to give to Sam, and then the second one I'll give to Dessa and Bill. So question for you, Sam, specifically from the audience. You mentioned innovation in corporate actions in your keynote. Can you explain more? My answer to that would be let's go watch Sam's keynote. But without giving the game away, Sam, what are you talking about?
Well, I think there's a number of areas. Let me just touch on three, I guess. I mean, manual processing is still at 87% in corporate actions. There's ways we can innovate and invent there. Data quality and legacy technology was cited as one of the biggest challenges, and 51% of the firms responded that was a problem. And then it's really new use cases, and to some of the points I mentioned earlier, it's the new technologies that are driving new use cases, and really regulation that's driving front office and middle office closer to back. So the data requirements are the same, but the use cases are different, right? So how do we repurpose some of this historical corporate actions data that we have is one of those conversations that we're having, and something that we're actually doing something about. So there's a ton of, and corporate actions, it has evolved, but it really hasn't been innovated in for many years, 20 years, let's say. And where we are now is we're really bringing that innovation into corporate actions. And one of them is corporate actions history in the cloud for data science, for innovation, for machine learning, for predictive analytics, for back testing. So that's the kind of stuff we're doing.
Very good, thank you. And this one struck me as being having Dessa's name all over it. How can governance be organized to reconcile regulatory reporting, data quality requirements, and commercial needs, AI solutions, for example, which have a higher data quality tolerance level? So I think it's about approaches to governance to ensure, that the quality is right for these very important reports and whatnot that the regulators are asking for.
Yeah, and I think that what I would say is that the data should be used, right. So if you look at corporate actions,
so we're losing Dessa a bit. Are you there, Dessa? We lost your sound a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ooh, okay, sorry. I'm in a hotel room. So my first trip of the year. What I would say is that it is really, really important. There's certain things that do not change, and it doesn't matter whether you're looking at client data, whether you're looking at reg data, and you have to get the data quality right. Know who your clients are, where they live, the tax ID, that doesn't change. It doesn't matter whether it's a reg report or it's a client report. That has to be right. What you do have to do is look at right sizing your governance model. So what I like to say is create a client wallet, a 360 view of your client. Use things like identifiers, LEI or NPI if it's individuals. So know your client, know what products that they have or they can purchase, And then make sure you put the highest level governance on that. That's the core data that should be enterprise, and that should power each one. I don't care whether it's a reg report, whether you're in the investment bank, whether you're in asset management, that client's that client, right? So IBM could be a vendor, it could be a client, it could be an issuer, it could be all of the, a consultant, it's all of the above. So you need to know those relationships, and then you can use it for client insights. Don't lock down your data. It would be the second thing, is make sure that that data is reused across the organization. We usually use a data services layer that we suggest, that you virtualize the data, make it available, dump it into an analytics lab, and let people play with it. Don't let them change it, because when it comes back in, they could do their modeling, et cetera. The risk could do what they need to do with it, and use AI, look at trends, and look at all the capabilities to look at what people are buying, et cetera. But the data before it comes back in, that golden data has to be locked down. You have to make sure that's right. But if you get what I call the client wallet right, and if you make sure that it goes into every report, then you can power all of them, and you have all the eyes looking at the same data, so the quality will improve. Your regulators will be happy, because the first thing that they do is they walk in the door and they say, what data did you give me on the report? Then they walk over to the finance person, they walk over to the risk manager and say, what data do you have? Does it match? So I would say that if you get that part right, if you get your products, your transactions, and your client data right, you can power it all, and you'll improve quality.
Very good. Thank you, Dessa. Bill, anything to add to that around that topic? And
well, it is a, it's getting the, as Dessa said, getting the data right. What we are finding, though, is that what is useful data, and what's remarkable is that with new technologies, wrong information is as valuable in determining the correct information. So validating and refuting, it's amazing how information, say directly from a client, is then matched with open source and unstructured data, and all of a sudden you could get that picture that Des is talking about much more clearly. So I think that the notion of, it's all about the training. If the model knows what to look for, it will bring it back. The problem is that I think most attempts were incomplete in that aspect. So that, but you've got to have good, solid, grounded validation data. You've got to have the customer data that you're maintaining. You have to have the customer inputs, and then let the technology meld all of that together, because it's beyond our capacity to really do it accurately now. But that is the nature of data management going forward.
Okay, we're kind of getting towards out of time, but we've had a great question from the audience about aligning the digital journey with the data journey. The questioner has said they're often on different timelines. So perhaps I could ask you guys just briefly to address that. So how should firms go about aligning those two timelines? We've got to keep it fairly short.
I can start. I think they're the same, the data journey and the digital journey. Identify what data you want to digitize and get to your clients. Focus on that first. But when you do focus on the data, look at it holistically. Look at how that data is used in the reg reports and et cetera. And then you can get, what Bill was just talking about.
Yeah. Mapping your policy of what you need, and then fulfilling that completely to the degree that it's possible legally. That's got to be first. Eventually, these two things have to catch up: what the client is experiencing and what we know about the client. Those two have to catch up, and at some point, predictive analytics has to say, "Stop. You shouldn't go further, or you just have to do more."
Linda,
yeah, and Andrew, I can.
Oh, Sam, you go first, Sam. Yeah.
Yeah, I can happy to add here too. I mean, I think these two strategies are intertwined. But I think, you know, what's often forgotten is the customer at the end, and really what does a customer want, right? And how do you get to deliver what they want at the end? I think that's one of the hardest questions to ask, because you make some assumptions internally about, based on the assets that you have with a firm. So you've got to have your digital catalog ready, as well as what you want to achieve with your digital experience. But you have to quickly assess what's priority, and then take that to the customers and say, ask for their validation and verification as to whether you're solving the right problems for them.
Very good. Linda, final word to you.
Yeah, I was just going to add that I'm cautiously optimistic. So I'm glad that everybody else on this chat is optimistic that they move at the same pace. I feel that firms have always had a hard time prioritizing the data quality aspect and the importance of that data. So hopefully with digitization, they can bring more light to how important it is to have them moving at the same time. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
Very good.
That's going to happen.
We have to be in this day and age. And on that note, we will wrap up this session. Many thanks to Linda, Dessa, Bill, and Sam. Appreciate you taking the time for us today, folks, and for your other contributions that are available through the platform. Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow for more of this. This has been quite a lot of fun. Went a bit longer than it was meant to, but time flies when you're enjoying yourselves. That's what they say. So until tomorrow, same time, same place. Please go and kick tires, look at our sponsors' resources, take advantage of all the great content we've pulled together for you. Lots of free stuff out there. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern time, for some more live content. We'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Andrew. Bye, everyone.